Hello everyone, welcome to another video. So standard is kind of sweet. It's kind of crappy too, because there's a lot of Jeskai and whatnot. But I think there's a lot of work to be done, and I'm getting started right here with a little Abzan red. This is possibly the deck I should have played in the Pro Tour. I started working on this pretty late before the tournament, and unfortunately ended up playing Mardu instead, where I went 5-5. I think I could have managed a 6-4 with this, at the very least. This deck seems pretty sweet to me. So, pretty normal Abzan control-y stuff, except because of the way the fetch dual mana bases work, we end up with a lot of free red mana in our deck because we want our Wooded Foothills to fetch Smoldering Marsh in addition to Canopy Vista, so it can either get green-white or a black source. But the black source comes attached with the red source, so hey, let's play some red cards, because Radiant Flames is pretty damn good. And Abzan is missing kind of like that top-end finisher, so we have some Dragon Lord Atarkas. So, what I try to do with this deck is keep the mana requirements to the bare minimum, because I think that's just going to be easier on us. Just easier on our lives overall. So, we have the barest of red splashes, despite having a lot of red mana in our deck, just by accident via the fetch lands. And we try to keep the white to a minimum also, because the cards that I want to play are Siege Rhino, perhaps you've heard of him, and Abzan Charm, which is just, the best utility card of all time, probably. And past that, you start sketching on a deck list, and you're like, all right, I want some Den Protectors. That's pretty normal. Duress is pretty good in the format, as is Radiant Flames and Languish as our sweepers. A couple Ruinous Paths, just like a pretty clean answer to a flip Jace. And I guess now that we have this Eldrazi ramp deck to worry about too. Some Nissas. Oh god, I hate how it just expands the card preview window, but yeah, Nissa's great, helps you hit your land drops. I'm running 27 land. I'll get into that a little bit later, but helps hit your land drops and provides like this late game threat, which is pretty nice. But then you start sketching out the deck list, and you're like, well, I can afford some Delve cards, maybe some Murderous Cuts, maybe some Tassigers, whatever. But it's like, what am I doing at 2 mana? Nothing. I got not a lot of stuff going on, so I think Hangerback Walker is just kind of in here as this early roadblock type of thing, but also a pretty resilient threat. And again, these Eldrazi decks are kind of a thing now, and having a colorless thing is pretty great against them because they can't Ugin it. So that's kind of nice. Also makes me want to play a Sorin, which is not the worst thing of all time. I would like an extra life gain spell, especially something that, can gain you upwards of 10 life. So that you don't die to become Immense Team or Battle Rage. So that kind of works out nicely. Other than that, I have an Ultimate Price and a Reeve Soul, and this is pretty light. I considered doing a few other things, like play Fiery Impulse. I think that card's really good right now, especially with Duress, because it means that your spell mastery is more likely to be turned on the more cheaper spells you have and whatnot. But this deck definitely needs something to do on turn 2, and realistically, casting Den Protector on turn 2 is not that great. Probably not the best use of your cards. So, that's about it, other than these random Catacomb Sifters, which I kind of want to try out. They seem really good against the red decks, specifically Atarka Red with all their Dragon Fodders and random crap. Titan Strength kind of gets past it, which is kind of annoying, but Sorin makes the Catacomb Sifters really good. Also, Devoid doesn't get killed by Ugin, which is nice. So that's kind of the main deck. Like I said, you could play a couple Delve cards because we're playing a bunch of fetch lands. I opted for Tassiger, kind of a similar approach to the Jeskai decks, where ultimately what I think these decks need is another big body and something very cheap. So having a 4/5 is pretty nice because it means that you block like all the Swift Spears, all their Zergos, their random Goblin tokens and whatnot, and it actually deters them from attacking. Bad thing is, Become Immense just kind of rolls right past it. I don't know if we're quite at the point where we want to play like Shambling Attendants or whatever to get that Death Touch in there, but Tassiger is pretty reasonable. Another threat, another card drawer, basically. So I like the main deck spells so far, even though it looks pretty weird. It definitely looks weird. Just, like random Catacomb Sifters in my control deck and whatnot. But hey, I'm trying stuff out, all right? So the mana. The mana's tough. I like Shambling Vent. Shambling Vent is a hell of a card. Puts you out of burn range, which is pretty nice. We have a decent amount of basics here to turn on our battle lands, We have 10 fetches and 2 Evolving Wilds. I do think that you can play an additional ETB tap land. I do want to try a list without any ETB tap lands, aside from Shambling Vent, because I'm definitely just going to keep playing 4 of that card. But Evolving Wilds, maybe even Sandstep Citadel or Nomad Outpost are other options, but I like Evolving Wilds because it basically counts as a basic land for your battle lands, makes it so like your turn 3, 4, 5 are all pretty smooth and all your lands come to play untapped and whatnot. And also I have 27 land. That's a lot of land, right? Most Abzan decks were playing like 26. Some were playing 27 towards the end. But basically we have a lot of colored mana requirements. They're all spread out. There's not a lot of CC stuff, aside from Languish and Ruinous Path. It's mostly just, ABC. So you want like one source of each color for the most part, sometimes double black. So I think Evolving Wilds, even though it counts for a source of any color, right? But once you use it, you only have, like, say you have to fetch a mountain with it. Well, then your Evolving Wilds only makes red mana. It's not like a City Brass. It's not going to make 4 colors like the entire time or whatever. So if you're building your mana base by looking at like how many sources of each color you have to be a little careful with Evolving Wilds because it's actually going to play out feeling like you have less colored sources than you really do. So like I said, you could play Sandstep Citadel because that kind of solves all those problems. But I really don't like Citadel in hands that only have 3 land or hands that have 4 land with a Citadel and a Shambling Vent, just because it means that you likely, like, your first battle land probably comes into play tapped. That's just the normal sequence of things. So I like having more lands just because it gives you a wider array of options for like how you want to fetch. Sometimes you'll keep like a 2 or 3 land hand. You'll have to go like battle land into basic, and then you'll have all your colors. But then like maybe the land that you draw is another battle land or another land that ETB's tapped or whatever, and then you just end up being like super slow and clunky, which is not what you should be trying to aim for when you have these fetch battle land mana bases. So more lands means that like your 3 land hand with 2 ETB tap lands, might actually be a 4 land hand, and then you have 2 ETB tap lands and 2 lands that ETB untapped. So yeah, more lands, more options, more colored mana sources for your 4-color deck and whatnot, and I feel like that's probably the best solution to these problems. Plus, this deck is pretty mana hungry, so I don't mind making all my land drops even up to like turn 7, turn 8, because we do have things like Dragon Lord Atarka. As for the sideboard, some weirdo stuff. A lot of my sideboards have 2 Ob Nixilis in them, and it's mostly just for matchups where if you get to play this on a board where they just have 1 creature and you just play it, kill their thing, your Ob Nixilis is not going to get attacked down, and then you just have this Howling Mine active. That's a pretty easy way to win the game. Most Jeskai decks are actually moving towards builds where that is more likely to happen against them too, so it's possible that Ob Nixilis is actually just a main deck card at this point, but when you're not playing against like Hangerback Walkers and Gideons, basically, is when you want Ob Nixilis, or Death Mist Raptor, I suppose, is another one. I have another Languish and another Radiant Flames, just more sweepers for the matchups where you want those specific sweepers. Languish is particularly good right now, I think. Also have a couple copies of Virulent Plague, 1 foil, 1 non-foil, because, I'm lazy and didn't want to find another copy of either one. But Virulent Plague is basically for the Sam Black deck. It kind of got crushed in Quebec City. Shahar top 16, I believe, and Sam Black lost to Shahar pretty early in day 1. But yeah, that deck did not have a great outing the first week after the Pro Tour, and I think it was because a lot of the decks had Virulent Plague in them. And, that's a hell of a card against the token strategy. So, Virulent Plague certainly does not have a ton of synergy with our deck because we have things like Hangerback Walker and even Catacomb Sifter. I got the Sorin chilling out too, which sometimes make tokens. I guess you might make an Ashaya token off your Nissa too, but basically, like, you play it because it KOs their deck. So, I think that is a pretty good card to have against them. Another thing is we go up to 3 and 4 Duress against red decks and Jeskai and, various control decks. Duress, just phenomenal card against them. It allows you to punch a hole through Ojutai's command, where normally you might just have to like keep playing creatures into it until they finally bite on one, which is not the best way to solve that problem. So it is really nice when they pass with 4 mana and you get to go like Duress you, take your 4 mana spell that you were going to play my Siege Rhino. So I think that's one of the best cards against them. Also have some Painful Truths in slower matchups, and I would kind of consider Jeskai to be that matchup. they're not super aggressive. They're mostly about grinding, and sure, they can chip shot you with Mantis Rider and maybe eventually burn you out with Crackling Doom. Some of them have Jeskai Charm too. But Painful Truce is definitely the best way to gain a little bit of velocity against those decks. Make sure you hit your land drops. Make sure you're using your mana every turn. I have a second copy of Sorin for against red decks. Also, some Ration Clerics. Cleric is not the best card against them, and I certainly don't like making it so I need white mana early against them, because I probably need white for Ration Cleric, probably need red for Radiant Flames, and certainly need green-black because those are my base 2 colors, but it kind of puts a little too much strain on the mana base. But you can't just try and beat the red decks with removal. At some point, you're going to need blockers, and I think right now the deck is doing a good job of that, but these are Ration Clerics, could also potentially be Catacomb Sifters. And then we have some Evo Leaps, and this is a card I kind of added as an afterthought, but has been one of my best cards by far. So you play against another grindy deck, and you get to sack like your Hangerback Walker, or you get to turn your Catacomb Sifter into like 2 big creatures, and that is pretty good. The only downside is that this deck, like I said, is really good at putting like red, white, green, black mana into play. And with Evo Leap, you definitely want an excess of green mana, and this deck is not great at doing that, unless you draw Nissa, really. So it's kind of awkward. You can usually only activate it once or twice a turn. The hope is that you get to play it with another green mana open, so you have it ready to go, but that is not the easiest thing to do, so maybe you have to work on the mana a little bit. Maybe Sandstep Citadel is actually necessary. But yeah, that's about it. That's the stack. I'm currently 2-0 in a league, and I'm going to finish that out and then maybe make some changes and play a 4th and maybe a 5th match. Probably just a 4th match, though. But yeah, this deck is sweet. I think it is pretty good. It might not be, one of the top tier decks or whatever, but I do think it has a shot against the top tier decks. So, let's get to some battles.